Okay, so thank you everybody for being here and for joining us for our last webinar of this semester. This webinar is sponsored by the AATSB chapter of downstate Illinois. Woohoo! We're small but mighty. And today we are honored to have with us Dr. Claudia Quevedo-Webb from the University of Chicago and Dr. Juan Godoy-Peñas from the University of Cincinnati, representing the Midwest. And we are very much eager to learn all about DEI-SLT, their new website. So Claudia and Juan, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. So first of all, welcome everyone and thank you so much for joining us today. As Florencia said, I am an assistant instructional professor in Spanish at the Romance Languages and Literatures Department at the University of Chicago. And we also want to take the time to say thank you to Dr. Florencia Henshaw for inviting us today. Juan?
Thank you everybody for being here. I'm Juan Godoy. I'm an assistant professor educator at the University of Cincinnati. And I'm also the coordinator of the Spanish Basic Language Program here.
Perfect. So today, together with Juan, we are going to present a project that includes social justice topics in our language curricula. And our goals of today are first to reflect in the relationship between social justice and second language acquisition, to present our project and our website, to present some examples and guidelines on how to develop materials that combine the use of social justice and language, and to also reflect and be critically aware of the materials that we as instructors use in our classes. So the structure of the talk is going to go as follows. We are going to do first a theoretical approach, then we're going to present our project and website. Then we'll show the examples, and then if we have time at the end, we will have some questions for you for reflection.
So I want you to start to thinking about this concept, language, identity, and power, to see how they can play a role in our language classroom. So if we try to define those concepts, we will see that language is defined by Norton as not only a linguistic system, and we'll know like words, nouns, adjectives, etc., but also a social practice. And a social practice in which identities and desires are negotiated in the context of complex and often unequal social relationships. So we are going to keep that in mind when we talk a little bit later about our language classroom. I also want you to think about how do we define identity. And also, Norton defines identity as the way a person understands his or her, I would say, their relationship to the world, how that relationship is structured across time and space, and how the person understands possibility for the future. But there are also three important aspects that we need to consider when we talk about identities. Identities are multiple. There are many different aspects that build our identity. They change. And I always provide the same example. Before I went to college, I was very Catholic. When I ended college, I was not Catholic anymore. So that changed through the college experience. And then the third aspect is a side of a struggle. Probably many of us have a struggle with an aspect of us and have come to accept some part of our identities when we grew up. And then the last concept I want you to think about is the concept of power. And also Norton defines power as the socially constructed relations among individuals, but not only among individuals, but also institutions and communities through which symbolic and material sources in a society are produced, distributed, and validated. And we're going to see some examples about that a little bit later. So also, it is important to keep in mind Wisdom's concept of language and subjectivity, because Wisdom affirms that language is the place where we construct ourselves. So when we invite our students to come to the language classroom, we are inviting them to construct a new self in a new language. And this is also very important to keep in mind. For example, when I'm saying, if I come here saying, hi, I am Juan, probably, and it might need to treat me in a more colloquial way, just with no formal setting. However, if I say, hi, I'm Dr. Godoy, I'm trying to establish somehow a relation of power, probably because of my background or my education level. So I'm constructing myself through the language I'm using to talk about myself. And this is also something that we are going to discuss a little bit later. Okay. So as many of you know, till the 90s, the research on second language acquisition was very focused on how the brain works when we are learning a second language. And as you all are familiar for sure, they were focused on the comprehensible input hypothesis, the interaction hypothesis, and the output hypothesis. However, at the end of the 90s, with fifth awareness, there was a social term, as is defined by Block. And there was a switch from an to approach SLA from a sociolinguistic perspective. That allow us to understand the dynamic nature of language and also the complexity and mutability of our language learners, of our students. And that also when a lot of research about learning diversity started to come out. So if we think about what does it mean to learn a new language, I always like to quote Uju Anya. And she said, learning a new language is a transformative socialization, which is how learners, instructors, and the communities enact new communicative cells as they collaboratively construct and negotiate multiple identities. And also, Anya, I had the pleasure to invite her to come to the Observatorio Cervantes Harvard a couple of years ago. Claudia, do you mind to go to the next slide? And she provided some more aspect of what a transformative socialization is. So she said, learning transforms identity. And again, I want you to think how your learning experiences transform who you are. Also, language learning draws from backgrounds, history, linguistic resources, identities to shape new cognitive cells. And the last one, this transformative socialization is becoming and speaking new self while participating in new communities. And these communities are the language community we are trying our students to engage with in our classrooms. So also we have to think that acquisition as activity and agency. And Lantolf, Palenko, as quoted by Block, have affirmed that learners are historically and sociologically active agents. They are actively developing and engaging in ways of mediating themselves and the relationship to the others in the community. And we all have had those cases in our classroom where some students did not participate in the classroom. And one of the theories is that this was a process of reactive resistance to attempts by target community members to marginalize the learners, or a passive process of acceptance of marginalization. We also need to keep in mind the agency is always co-constructions via interaction. So we need to keep in mind how we are promoting this co-construction agency in our classroom. And finally, as we have already discussed, learning as part of an ongoing constructions of the self-identity of our students. So how can we make our students become agents in the new language? Cynthia Nelson talked about two theories. On one side, she talked about the pedagogy of inclusion, which is aimed to introduce images as well as experience of diversity identity into curriculum materials. And we will say that that will approach the diversity aspect. However, actually, Nelson was not totally in favor of a pedagogy of inclusion because she has some concerns about whether when we are trying to, if at the same time that we are trying to introduce image from new identities, are we not at the same time marginalizing or not including other identities? So she was always very concerned about the pedagogy of inclusion. So she decided to support more a pedagogy of inquiry. In this pedagogy of inquiry, she affirmed that students and teachers alike investigate how some linguistic and cultural practices naturalize only some kind of identities, and that's when we will talk about inclusion. However, I have to say that I don't think they are totally opposed, and I think we can combine both of them in our language language classrooms. And I'm going to show you some examples in a little bit later. So as we think about our students, we need to think also about the different aspects that play a role in our students' identity, also probably in your own identity. And those are just a few of them. There are many other aspects that we can definitely consider. So I just decided to include some of them. For example, social class, gender identity, sexual identity, religion, nationality, race, ethnicity. We can also talk about disabilities, for example, that is barely mentioned in many of our language classrooms. Okay, so these are just a few of them that I want you to think. And many of them play an important role in the language in a very easy way. And I'm just going to provide you an example. Let's think about when we are coming back to class after the summer, and we ask our students, where did you go on vacation last summer? We are assuming that our students can afford to go on vacation. So that way we are also somehow giving privilege to some social class students who can afford to go on vacation, but not everybody can go to vacation. So maybe instead of saying, where did you go on vacation last summer? We could say, what did you do last summer? No, where did you go on vacation? So those are small details that make us think about identities and how they play a role in our activities and in the tasks we decide daily. So Claudia, you're going next, right?
Yes, thank you. So now I'm going to present our website, DEI-SLT. It stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Second Language Teaching. So first of all, a quick overview. The project was born from the necessity that we thought that our languages and our second language classroom needed to combine the teaching of second languages and the social justice topics in this globalized world. Why is this important? Because we realize that some lesson plans and some textbooks are based on a traditional canon that gives no space for diversity and inclusion. So our main goal is to raise awareness about multicultural education and bring social justice topics into our language curricula. So in order to do this, we decided to develop and create an open educational resource website with the help of Circle from the University of Arizona. And we have two main objectives. First, we want to include webinars, bibliography, and showcase and inform on the implementation of social justice in the language classroom. I'm going to show you the website in a second so I can show you how to navigate these and see the bibliography, the tutorials, etc. And then we also wanted to serve as a repository of tasks, lesson plans, and materials for teaching second languages that foster DEI. In this regard, for now, we only have Spanish materials because these are the materials that Juan and I have developed. But we welcome you to send us some materials that you have created for your own classes, and we will be happy to review them and publish them in our website. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with Juan, can you copy the link also on the chat, please? Thank you.
For sure.
So when you go to the website, this is what you're going to see. And here are all of the parts of our website, but you can also scroll down and keep going. So first, if you go to what is the DEI-SLT, you can see how the project was born and also some theoretical implications. Then if you go here and you go to learn more, you will have a little biography of us. And finally, when you go to resources, if you click on get instructions, you are going to see a unit plan template video tutorial and a lesson plan template video tutorial. I'm going to talk about the unit plan template in a second, but I also want to say that if you click here, you're going to be able to go and see our unit plan template PDF that you can download and modify and use for your own purposes. So everything that's on the website can be downloaded, and you can just modify it or take what you like and discard what you may or may not like. If you go to exploring key concepts, you can also click here, and you're going to see some concepts that we thought were especially important for a website like ours. We particularly like this video that talks about intersectionality that Juan showed me, and since then I use in my classes often. If we go to, then we are on the works of creating a podcast. We'll probably do something more about it this summer, but we also have bibliography. And the part that I like most about this bibliography is that if you click in some of these links, you're going to see that they open the PDF if they are available online. So finally, in the website, there is the part of getting involved that I was talking about before. And let's see if it charges. Or maybe it doesn't want to charge. Yes, there we go. So if you go to the end, you're going to go to get involved. You're going to submit this little survey, and then you will receive an email from us with further instructions if you would be interested. And of course, our email for any questions, concerns, or anything else that you would want to talk to us, please feel free to send us an email and we'll be happy to help. So now that I've shown you how to navigate the website, I want to talk a little bit more about the creation of materials. So I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. In order to create our materials, we based our unit plan templates on the one of Glynn, Wesley, and Wassel of 2014, and our lesson plan template is based on the Clementi and Terrell 2013 one. When thinking about creating these templates, we decided to follow a very structured methodology just to make sure that we are actually combining both social justice and language topics. So if you look at our template, you first are going to see the title. In this case, we chose an example of work in the Hispanic world. And then the second part will be the social justice takeaway understandings that you would like your students to have at the end of the unit. One example is the challenges that non-traditional identities face when applying or developing a specific world. That could be a social justice and the takeaway understanding by the end of the unit. Following the ACTFL guidelines, we have included an example on how to implement the 5 C's in a given unit plan, and we have given specific examples of communications, connections, cultures, comparison, and communities in this specific unit plan. And also keeping in mind that not every lesson plan will include all of them. Finally, of course, the 3 P's: products, practices, and perspectives. And we're here also giving a specific examples of what we would mean by products, like advertisements, practices like behaviors or expectation in the workplace, and perspectives, which are the reflection on how these products and practices tell us about the society that we are talking about. And finally, and I would argue that this is probably the most important part for our classes, is combining both the language and social justice objectives. So students will be able to identify the jobs. Here we have the linguistic outcome, the vocabulary that traditionally and stereotypically have been identified with a specific gender. In this second part, we can see how the social justice takeaway understanding is set. And in this goal, you can see both at once. So now, after we've shown you this, we want to give you an example of the kind of materials that you can find ready to download in PowerPoint and to modify in our website. Juan is going to give you an example first, and then I'll give you my second example.
So for example, and I'm not going to explain the lesson plan template because we don't have enough time, but you also have the lesson plan template in the website if you want to download it. So in the first part of the lesson plan, it would be the active prior knowledge. So we want to see what our students already know. So we will ask them, who is she? She's obviously Jennifer Lopez. Where is she from? She's estadounidense. And we need to keep in mind that one of the goals is to talk about, well, the linguistic goal is to talk about adjective that, adjectives to describe nationalities, and the cultural or the social justice talk is about to identity and nation. So that will be part of the prior knowledge, and then we can also ask, who is he? He's Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Where is he from? He's Colombian. So then in the first activity, we want to provide input. And in the input, what we can do is we can give them pictures of different people. As you see, I have targeted different identities, and then they have to match their person with the correct sentence. In the second activities, this is an awareness reading task. So students need to look at the sentence that they will provided in the task one, and then they need to think whether each adjective fits in one of the categories of the table. So once the students have reflected on the different characteristics of the adjectives, then we can give them a short review to make sure that they understand everything. But after that, in the task 3, students are able to use the adjective to describe, in that case, the family or Frida Kahlo family. Finally, actually we have a transitions, and we will ask them how would they describe physically the typical or the stereotype Spaniard. And after that, we present this article. This is an article that was published a few years ago, that it was called Yo también soy español. I'm also a Spaniard. And in this article, they interview 5 Spaniards who were born in Spain, and they were children of immigrants. And they talk about the challenges that they face in Spain because of the physical appearance does not match the stereotypical physical appearance of a Spaniard. And as you see, just the sentence "Yo también soy español" is easy to be understood at Spanish 1001, 101, whichever number you use in your institution. And then we ask a student to reflect on these 3 questions. Are there stereotypes between the physical appearance of a person and the nationality? What do you think these 5 people say? I'm also Spaniard. How do you think that immigration changed stereotypes? So you see, we were using first the language to use adjectives for nationalities, and now we are moving to a more critical thinking and social justice oriented goal. So after that, we have a discussion with the students, and we ask them to think at the end of the class about whether it's possible to have a double national identity. Sometimes we also have the opportunity to ask them to do some research at home. And in that case, I ask them to participate in a discussion forum in Canvas. And I ask them to look for an important person from the community that had a double national identity. And I provided them an example. In that case, I provided them with Hilda Solis, who had family from Nicaragua and from Mexico, and who was the former labor secretary, actually the first one Latina in the White House with President Obama. And now, Claudia, you're going to present the second example.
Yes, thank you, Juan. So I created this lesson plan for my Spanish Intermediate 3 classroom, which is by the end of this sequence, the students are supposed to have an advanced low level. So the title of the sequence is, "Does my job depend on my gender?" So as I said, spiraling language and social justice topics is really important. So in this particular lesson, we are going to talk about gender inequality and sexism in the workplace as the social justice topic, but then we are also going to, the target is the present perfect subjunctive for grammar. So I believe that we would need a present perfect indicative review and a little bit of review of the context that requires subjunctive in order to achieve this goal. So first we can do an activate prior knowledge activity for both content and grammar, you can see in green the present perfect. So what does the word sexism mean? What jobs have been traditionally masculine or what jobs have been traditionally feminine? After doing this, we can do an awareness raising task, asking them, when do we use the present perfect indicative, and do a little review here. First, in groups, they are going to reflect about some questions based on an article that they had read before coming to class about a problem in an in the Argentinian working place. So first, I'm doing a comprehension question, again targeting this present perfect. Then I'm doing an intercultural question, asking them if these practices also exist in our societies, and then what things have changed in our societies with respect of sexism in the working place. So we are doing both comprehension and reflective questions based on the article. Finally, I'm giving them some opinions, and here in red, I'm targeting finally the present perfect subjunctive. And I'm asking them if they agree or disagree with these statements. Afterwards, I'm going to ask them, as you can see, I'm using present perfect subjunctive in these two statements. Why am I doing so? And here we have another awareness raising moment in which they hopefully would have read the grammar and would tell me why I'm using subjunctive in this specific moment. A small review of the context of subjunctive here. And finally, I would ask them to do a work in pairs in which I'm going to give them some statements that a company has issued regarding equality in the working place. And I want them to work in pairs to tell me what measures that the company has published they believe, they think, or they are sure that the company has done present perfect, and what measures they don't believe, they don't think, they don't like, they are bothered by, or they are worried by, that the company has taken present perfect subjunctive. So I'm giving them the triggers for indicative and the triggers for subjunctive, and then I provide them with an example. And on the next slide, I give them the measurements that the company has taken, and then they will have to use these triggers to talk in pairs using present perfect and present perfect subjunctive. And as Juan did before, after class, we are going to do a reflective activity regarding why do they think that these gender stereotypes exist regarding the working place, what things do we still need to do, and at home, I want them to do some research for the next day and find a person from the Spanish-speaking world that has challenged these stereotypes in the working place, and how has he or they done it. And again, we have the present perfect subjunctive here. So this is also a PowerPoint that you can find in the website, and you can download and change as much as you want for your classes.
So now, because we are right on times, we have planned for half an hour as Florentia asked us, but I want you to think about the typical physical appearance of the people that appear in the pictures of photos of your lesson plans, your books, the material you use in your classroom. I also want to invite you to think about whether your lesson plans include people from multiple races, nationalities, religions, sexual, gender identity, sexual orientation, how or whether they may be reinforcing some stereotypes, even if we were not aware of those. Also, I want you to think whether your lesson plans allow students to become agents, and how do they foster critical thinking. And I want you, if someone is happy to talk, to give me an example of how they may do some of the questions in a positive way, and how that could be changed after the very short presentation that we did today. So I don't know if anybody is happy to share something.
We had a question, if you don't mind, before we get into discussion, because it was related to what Claudia, the example that Claudia was just sharing.
Yeah.
The question was, this is based on higher education, mature students. Do you have a comment on how to work this topic for middle and high school students? And the topic that you were discussing was gender inequality in the workplace?
Thank you so much. I have not had an opportunity to teach either in middle school or high school, but I would be happy to do some kind of brainstorming with you or talking about some ideas. I'm sure that there are some questions that are a little bit more difficult, but I am sure that we can all think of with the student, with younger students, not smaller students, with younger students about what jobs do women usually do, what jobs do men usually do, and then we could probably present them with some examples of people who challenge these stereotypes to force critical thinking. I think Juan has an idea as well.
Yes, and probably something basic that could be done also is when we provide a list of vocabulary about profession to our students, and we can ask them to classify them into columns, one for women and one for men, or where they are more frequent done by them. And after a student have classified them, you can ask them, what did you put them in that category and not in the other? And then you guys are having a small discussion, and then, as Claudia said, showing people who actually breaks this stereotype or this standard common belief or something like that.
And I'm sure some of these young students would surprise us with their answers, because the new generations are very forward thinking, I believe. Sorry that we cannot be of more help on this issue particularly, but if you have any ideas, we would love to hear them as well.
I would say maybe the workplace may or may not, fit in with whatever you're covering with younger learners. I know that it tends to be for high school and college students, perhaps more, but even adjectives for one of the courses, and it is Spanish in the professions, right? So we're talking about personality traits that we value, right? And things like that. But even then, when we think about what adjectives we use to describe famous women versus famous men versus what are we associating, right, with women, and even how one adjective for a woman might evoke different things than an adjective to describe a man, right? So even just to make them aware of those things in language and what they're reflecting about identity, I think it's very important. Okay, do you want to display the questions and we can go back to those? There was something about becoming agents. I'm sorry, I don't remember the full question.
Yeah, I'm gonna
the word agent.
I'll copy the questions on the chat, and
okay.
Everybody can feel free to respond to any or all of them.
And I was drawn to the question, does my lesson plan allow students to become agents? Because it's something that I even asked Dr. L.J. Randolph after watching one of his webinars, right? That I noticed after watching a lot of social justice webinars, I noticed almost a trend where only stays at the awareness level, right? So it's a lot about becoming aware, and there's a lot of value in becoming aware. I'm not denying that, right? But I'm always missing the agent, the action portion of it. And I think that's the hardest one to implement in a lesson plan. So I was wondering, with all of your experience, creating materials or uploading materials that people submit for the website, have you seen any really good examples where action, where agency was part of the lesson, where it didn't just stay at the awareness level?
For example, I saw one person that shared what she had done, and she had actually asked a student to create memes. Those memes had to be shared actually in social media, and those memes addresses stereotypes of national stereotypes. So that was a way, in my opinion, a very good way in which students became agents in that case. And she had a very positive reaction from the students according to the information she provided to me.
Yeah, I haven't uploaded this to the website yet, but I'm working on a lesson plan that includes a virtual reality. And the final project that my students did was actually taking their own cameras and recording themselves on campus. Because I'm thinking about creating some kind of tour in Spanish for families that speak the language and that they can, so that they have that accessibility. And all the tours are not only in English online, like 360 reality tours. So I think that could be a good way for students to feel that they are agents, that their work is valued, and that they are actually doing something with the work that they are doing in terms of diversity, equity, and in this case, particularly inclusion, I would say. So it's difficult, and I don't think it's possible with every lesson plan. But I think we can do a lot of awareness and then some agency. It would be ideal that we could like go out to the world constantly with our students, but I don't know if it would be possible in every lesson plan that we have. And I agree with you 100% is the most difficult part to think about for me as well.
Okay, we have a question. Should our goal be activism? What do you think?
Could we elaborate more on that question? Like,
could you elaborate, Dulce? Okay, maybe while Dulce is typing the clarification or expansion, Angelo has a question. Let me see. I just changed the setting. So Angelo, you should be able to unmute.
Hello, how is everybody doing? I apologize in advance if my son starts yelling, but I actually wanted to share as far as the lesson plans with the being more inclusive as far as races, nationalities. I always try to infuse it because I work in a suburban area where students are not exposed to different different, not necessarily nationalities, but different type of Latinos, type of Hispanic people. For example, I'm from Peru, and I always like to show videos that there are so much different mixture of indigenous people that are from La Sierra, or people that are Afro-Latinos from Chincha. So they actually tell me like, oh, I didn't know there were Black people in Peru. Well, they are. And also trying to reinforce that indirectly, perhaps, because we need, in K-12, we need to be very careful. Also, we know what's going on with in social media and all of that, that reinforce that women should be empowered, and especially young girls. So I like to play always videos and activities that girls can always support each other and embrace their strengths. So we do a lot of activities for Women's History Month, where girls support each other. They always give shout outs. And again, regardless of religion, regardless of sexual orientation or anything like that. So it's always good to do it and embedded in the lesson plans. Yeah, I think that's a way I personally do it in my K-12. I work in a high school, so we have a little more freedom to show those either images, pictures, or videos rather than elementary school students. But at the same time, we also need to be careful because, again, we all know that what's going on with the politics, that we need to be careful how to mention it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's really important to raise awareness, especially in high school as well. I think Juan has also a lot of experience teaching Afro-Latino products in the language classroom. So maybe you can say a little bit about that, Juan.
And I also, I wanted to add that it's not always us, the one who are bringing them the knowledge. We may be not experts on everything. We are not experts on race theory. We are not experts on queer theory. We are not. So our goal is not so much about bringing all the knowledge, but about facilitating the research and facilitating access to different kind of populations and allowing a student to dig and to know a little more, to go online. because we are not expert. I'm not an expert on race theory. I'm not an expert on queer theory. I'm not an expert on religion studies. We all have learned how to teach studies. Actually, I haven't been in half of Latin America, so I have to talk about many of the countries. So we are not the only expert. It's more about creating a space where our students can actually research and question many things that are being represented by the materials or by the topic that we are brought, that we bring into class, or that our students can bring to the class. We are not always the person who needs to bring the topic. We just have to be also open to listen to our students.
And in relation with that, I also think that we need to say that we are not the voice of any minority communities. We are just people that are facilitating discussion. We don't pretend to be the voice. I don't even pretend to be the voice of women in general. I think we all have our own experiences. I think what's meaningful is to bring conversation, create awareness, and for students to talk about this. So I don't know if Dulce was trying to ask this, but I'm not trying to tell students what to think or how to think about things. I'm just trying for them to take a look at the society, see what they think and how they feel about it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. There's another question. It says, you mentioned about levels of involvement, one of them being awareness raising. What are the other levels? Can you elaborate on that?
Umida, would you mind to elaborate on the question a little bit? I'm not sure when you mean about levels of involvement.
Yeah.
Hello. You
Hi.
just mentioned, hi. You just mentioned about like lessons and that many social justice activities remain at the like awareness level. You would like maybe critical thinking, other levels. So I was wondering, what are the other levels?
So yes, so the first level, probably the easiest to reach normally is the awareness raising, to make our students aware that things are differently, that things are not as they thought. And this is extremely powerful, but that's probably the easiest to achieve. Then the second level is probably critical thinking, asking, teaching them to think without us, to question without us. So when they leave the classroom and they see a product, an authentic product, to be able to analyze the product, to understand the power relations between that product without me facilitating the conversation. So that will be the second level. And then the third level is that the one that we were discussing before with Florencia about the agency. And that's the hardest one. And that's, as we say, it's not the one that needs to happen always, but maybe it's the one that can be in the final project, in a specific assignment, maybe not in every lesson plan, but look for a specific moment on your curriculum where agency can play an important role.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. Are there any other questions or comments?
There are no other questions or comments for now. Have you ever had, I'm just curious, have you ever had an experience where the student became aware, but they were still not willing to reconsider, or they still seemed, I don't know how to say it, they seemed resistant perhaps to the approach, or they felt unfairly challenged, or you know what I mean, like where it didn't really go how you would hoping it would go?
I did one, but it was actually not a language class. It was actually a more advanced class that it was actually focused on social justice in Latin America. So in that class, yes, I had a challenge, but actually never in a language class. And for example, one topic that we haven't discussed today, but the students are always, in my opinion, very open to accept and to involve in the use of the language, is the use of the inclusive language. So since the day one, I use O, A, and E. I always use the three of them.
Me too.
And there are many, many, many instances in where my students use in their text a to refer to non-inclusive people. I don't impose it. I tell them this is an option. Whether you want to use it, you can use it. If you don't want to use it, it's your choice. But I see like many examples of my students, for example, using inclusive language.
Because the idea is that we're not forcing anything. That's how I feel about it. We're just showing them the resources, showing the language that exists. I am not inventing the E at the end for non-binary or inclusive language that exists, is on TV, it's on politics, it's in the language that people use. So I'm just facilitating, and then if they want to use it, it's great. If they prefer to identify with the A, with the O, that's totally fine with us as well. So I've never had a problem because I feel I've never tried to force anything in students. It's more like, this is the reality of our world. It's very diverse, it's very inclusive. This is everything. And now we're going to maybe critically think about it.
And this is actually also giving them agency because they are open to choose what they want to do. And also to make them aware of the consequences of their choices. I always, for example, when it comes to inclusive language, I ask them, yes, you can use A in my classroom. I'm not sure whether if you go to another class and your professor will be allowed it, because that is actually not officially accepted by the Royal Academy of the Language. So another professor may not accept it, or you may go to the real world, as some people may not be aware of what that A means. You may go to the unofficial test, and they will not accept it because Cervantes Institute may not accept it. So this is the situation. So now is your moment to decide. You decide what you want to do with the language. So this is also giving them agency.
Yeah, knowledge is power at the end of the day. And in these cases, it's very easy to compare with the they, them in English in terms of the inclusive language, for example, because I'm sure that not in every standardized test, the singular they is accepted, or things like this, and they are able to understand this and to compare it with the Spanish language and then make their own decisions and decide and understand that some things don't give you access to certain things, but give you access to other things. And that's a very important conversation to have here. And I think that Ariel has a question.
Yes, Ariel.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I can turn my video on if you'd like. Hi, thank you so much for this talk and all of the great resources. I just, to Florencia's question, because I teach Latino identities in contemporary film class, and I had this experience of this student that had like the very like colorblind mentality, like just really early on in the class, like, well, we just shouldn't be racist. And I presented so many different narratives of like Afro-Mexican, Dominican, we watched In the Heights in both English and Spanish. I mean, we did so much stuff. And by the end, I still just felt like she was like the same. And I just was, I was taken by that, and I just kind of wanted to share my little anecdotal story. Some of the other students I felt like really did move along, but it was eye-opening to me as to like, how do you get to that student? Because those are the students that you know, it's like, how do you open their eyes to the fact that their eyes aren't open when they think their eyes are open?
But I can relate. I mean, I've had experiences where, you know, the students are very much like, you're in the US, speak English mentality. And you can see the other ones changing and even like reconsidering, yeah, why do we need an official language? Like they start, and that's great. But some students, I feel like, have I not, you know, done it in a right way? But maybe it's more of a, you know, you give them the tools, you give them the information, you give them the opportunity, but I guess it's not our job to change their minds, or it's not our job to tell them what to think, right? So then, but I understand, Ariel, I can relate to that feeling. You start to question yourself, like, how is it that, you know, they're not seeing what I'm seeing? But maybe that's just part of our own reflection too. I don't know.
Actually, let me give you an answer that actually is not mine. Stacy Margareta Johnson gave it in another talk when this was also discussed. And she was actually right when she said, we cannot measure whether our students are changing right away. We just know that we are doing our job, and we are planting a seed. And some moment, maybe in 3, 5, 7 years, that seed will flourish. You may not be able to see that right now, but probably that student will have that in their backpack, and now one moment that flourish. Yeah. Yes, maybe 3 months of your class will not be enough for the students. Hopefully 1 year, maybe better, or 2 years, but probably that will flourish as a moment, or hopefully, I hope so. Yeah. But sometimes, I mean, it is not easy for discussion, and we can just not expect everybody in 3 months to change their point of view, their perspectives, right? This takes time, and we have to also be willing to work with the different rhythm of every student and every learner.
Mm-hmm. And also, we cannot expect everybody to think the same and feel the same about everything, especially in such a polarized society at the moment, where everything seems to be political somehow. We don't know the background of our students, the conversations that they are having in other outlets. So I think we have to take that into account and just facilitate the discussion, do everything in our part to be as equitable, inclusive, diverse, like promote diversity as possible. And then, as Juan said, hopefully one day they'll start thinking in that way as well. But I understand the frustration. I would feel the same way.
So can I ask a follow-up question to that? How do you feel about including all viewpoints? And it may sound like a silly question, but sometimes the voices that we include might be hurtful for some identities. So do we not include those voices? Do we only present one side of it, if you can call it that way? I hate that phrase because it evokes things that I don't want to evoke, but do you know what I mean? I feel like, is everybody always invited to the table, or do we filter, which voices have a place in our classroom?
Actually, in my opinion, I think we should bring all voices, especially because if we want our students to be able to participate in the communities, in the real communities, we also want them to teach them how to react to specific speeches. However, this entails some challenges. So before we bring some speeches or some product that goes against some identities, we need to make sure that we have a safe space, and we need to make sure that we are getting our students ready and they are aware of the speeches that we may bring to the classroom, and even asking them how they feel about it. But otherwise, we are not going to teach them how to fight or how to react if they hear a comment from somebody in the real language. And in my opinion, at the end, we want them to be able to go to Mexico, to Puerto Rico, to Argentina, and be able to talk, to engage with the real community. I mean, they don't need to go anywhere. They are here in the US, actually. So, my bad. So, but if we don't bring these speeches to the classroom, how are we getting them ready to do so?
And then I think it would depend in the topic. There are some things that are human rights issues, in my opinion. For example, we cannot, in my opinion, there are things that shouldn't be a question of opinion for everybody in the classroom because they could hurt someone. For example, let's say that somebody thinks, like, I don't know, that, I don't know, something, for example, that I remember that in one classroom, do you remember our colleague Jose from Harvard, that she had a student who strongly believed that gay people were sick, for example. I don't think that's a conversation for the classroom because that's a huge human right violation to say that, and it could hurt a lot of people in the classroom. So I would never ask a question such as, how do you feel about gay people? because that's not relevant in our society. That's how I feel about it, but I don't know how.
And I didn't mean to bring somebody to say that into class, but I would definitely bring, for example, a text that was written by someone with some opinions to criticize and to go and to analyze the language that is used in this text and how to react when you are reading a text or when you are talking about somebody like this. Obviously, like, there are things that you don't discuss. You don't discuss about how you feel or whether this is right or wrong. No, there's no discussion. That's not the point of the language classroom, for sure.
What do you think, Florencia, or anybody else?
You make great points. Claudia, like what you said really resonated with me. I even feel apprehensive about bringing a text that is attacking the identity of some of my students, even if I understand, Juan, like the whole like preparing them, but I think you have to do it so skillfully and carefully that it can go wrong so easily. And it's like the kind of damage that I don't know that I want to risk, if that makes sense. And so I feel like I understand for some topics, yes, I feel comfortable. So for example, cases of linguistic discrimination, let's talk about them. And I understand maybe some of them may have experienced that too, right? So there could be some trauma there too. But I don't know, it could be that that's just how I feel comfortable because I know what to point out and how to make them feel validated. But some topics, like you said, since we're not experts, other than saying this is a human rights violation and I want to scream it at the top of my lungs, I would feel it's just unsure. I want them to feel validated. I don't want them to be reading an article written that criticizes their identity. It's just to me would maybe I'm not brave enough. You know what I mean? Like I
totally understand, but that's why I also said, ask the students, ask what they want to do. Do they want to bring it to the classroom? They don't want to. It's up to them. Let them to be agent and to decide which text they want to bring to the classroom, what they want to discuss. Also, I mean, let's give them a voice.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Did I miss? I'm sorry. I was so into the discussion. I forgot about my hosting duties. You're getting just a lot of thank yous, very valuable discussion. Make students do art or writing, advocating for what they love.
I love that.
Yeah. And hello, I agree. I think that sometimes it may not need to be a class discussion, but it could be a private thing. And I've done that too. And then in those cases, I said, in whatever language it comes to you, like this is about processing it. So do we have, yes, we have another question. How would you respond to parents and or students who might consider that our inclusive curriculum is political?
Well, not making it inclusive is also political. So I think it's very difficult to never be political. So I guess I would say that.
Yeah, I no, it's a good question, and it comes up a lot, right, in these kinds of discussions. One thing I've heard on social media, I think it was Catherine Usling recently said, sometimes it's maybe what we call it. So maybe if we say like global-minded curriculum, sometimes the term is more triggering or evokes things that sound political and that you may get the pushback, but that perhaps if you call it something else, if you approach it from a different angle, and if it becomes more about information than pushing an agenda, I think maybe there's a way of, Juan?
And sometimes, as you say, it's just about the name. You don't need to say this is an inclusive language. You are just bringing a real, authentic text that you found online. And in that text, they use the authentic language. So you explain to students what it was, so they know they're learning the language and they have to learn authentic text. And I mean, Netflix nowadays, in many of the shows in Spanish in Netflix, they use inclusive language, many of them. So you just are bringing a short clip from a show. They use inclusive language, and you need to explain to students why they're using this.
Yeah,
and it's just bringing reality to the classroom. That's all, in fact.
I just want to add, I know, Claudia, I'm sorry, we're running out of time and I really don't want to keep you over time. Fantastic discussion. And AATSB recently had a webinar with several panelists offering their own experiences and viewpoints on inclusive language and how specific to inclusive language and how to approach that with parents, which sometimes in higher ed we don't have to do, right? So I would highly recommend checking that recording from AATSB. So thank you, everybody. We are completely out of time. Let's give a round of virtual applause to Claudia and Juan. Thank you both very, very much. And thank you for creating DEI-SLT. Sorry. Yes, I got it right. Yes. Okay. Thank you for that resource. And I hope that many of tonight's participants contribute with their own lesson plans. All languages welcome. Yes. Okay. So thank you all very much. And
thank you.
Hope you stop by for our next webinar, probably summer or next semester. Have a great rest of the year, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I just have one question before you go. Do you mind?
Yes.
If I ask, you mentioned something about a link to another webinar that really dug a little bit more deeply. Is there any way you could send us the link to those of us who participated in this webinar? Could you send a link to that recording so we could access
yeah,
it?
Absolutely. Yes. It's on the ATSB and Avant websites. I'm happy to share that. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This was very valuable.
All right. Bye, everybody.